Hey guys, so it's Saturday morning here in sunny Gothenburg, and it is way too early for me to be up, but I felt, hey, let's go out for a walk. It's a nice day. So I wanted to talk to you about something that you may have heard from somebody else, and you'll probably hear some people talk about the different stages of programmers. So what we mean about that is that in general terms, on your way from going from a complete beginner over to becoming a pretty decent programmer, or even a master if you're trying to be like one of the best, or whatever your goals are, you generally go through three stages. And the first stage is like the junior stage, when in general that's when you're just learning programming and you're kind of, the basics, and you can make a program work and you can make some basic things happen, but you don't really consider all the things that are around it. Like, you don't think about like best practices and standards and like all that stuff. This is in general when you've been programming for about everything from never touching any code until like say a year, something like that, in general terms. It depends, of course, of how much time you're investing in this. And then you will enter a phase which is called the philosopher, or the philosophical phase, and that's when you feel comfortable with the basics of programming and you can write like fairly good stuff, and like you can make applications that are non-trivial. And I'm talking like not hello world or a little to-do list. You're able to build production level software, and this is when you start going into patterns. In general, you're starting to like think about, okay, how do I write this in the best way possible? How do I create the best thing that I can possibly create? And you're like thinking about, you're throwing in, like my favorite example is, once again, I did a job interview and they threw in a monad into the code mix, and I've told my colleagues, and I probably said so in a previous video, if you throw in a monad in two places in a code base, then you're in the philosopher stage, because there's really no reason for you to do that at all. The value is almost non-existent, and what in general terms this phase you're going to go through is you're going to try and use a lot of fancy stuff and like try to like misuse really good stuff. Think of it as, if you want to get like an old tree or a stump away from your backyard, like a professional is going to dig up the roots and use a chainsaw and like that stuff. But in the philosopher, the person like in this phase, they're going to try to use a nuclear bomb, because they don't have an understanding of like what tool to use in what situation. This is generally speaking. And then finally, you're going to be in what is called the master phase, or the pragmatic master, or whatever. And that's usually where most like, and some people never get to this point. Some people stay in the philosopher phase forever. But in essence, what it means is that you know the tools, you know the patterns, you know what to do, but you also know when not to do it. Think of it as a philosopher asks a question in this way. They look at the problem and say, okay, I have a few patterns here that I want to use. How do I make them work with this problem? That's not, and that a pragmatic master thinks in terms of, okay, I have this problem. How do I solve this in the based on my time and the stakeholders, and like, do I hack something together? Do I do a really good job, or is there does this problem perfectly fit with the pattern? Do you see it's a subtle difference, but you're not thinking about how do I use my how do I show off my engineering. You're just trying to solve the problem in it doesn't have to be in the best possible way, because best is a very relative term, and you're going to learn that as you go through things. Like I did that the really hard way. When I started my education was based on Java programming, and all it was like really corporate mindset, like a lot of testing, a lot of that stuff. And I had that, like when I came out into the working, like, and started working, of course that's the way I was thinking about it. And it probably would have suited me very well to go into one of these really big corporations where they really only care, like they care more about stability and like that stuff than quick iterations, and that type of stuff. But my first job, that's what it was. Like they didn't care so much about like making everything perfect and like creating like these really robust, well-engineered systems. They wanted things quick and dirty in general, because for them speed was the important bit. And that's where I'm going with this. When you start to get, you will know yourself when you're at a level where like most of you're gonna question yourself and think, okay, when am I good enough? And I will say that you are a true professional, because you're never gonna stop learning. I mean, shit, I fail. Like if you give me a code test, odds are I'm gonna fail it. I'm not joking. Depending on what type of code test it is, I might fail it, and I will argue that goes for most people. Because it's very difficult to measure how, like, what are you when you are a professional. But I'm going to take a stab at it and give you a general feeling for when that is. And that is when somebody asks you, okay, I want you to build me this thing here. And the first thing that you're thinking about is, okay, who is asking this? What are their needs? Do they care? Like, what, you don't start thinking about from your perspective. You don't think about, okay, I'll use Webpack and I'll use microservices, or like that's not your first thought. Your first thought is, okay, what are the needs of the person who wants me to build this thing? And how can I, as quickly as possible, meet those needs? Because everybody always, trust me, there are two things that universally every customer or person or like whoever is buying software from you, because remember, you're building most of the time something for somebody else. If you're building it for yourself or you are the only stakeholder, then go crazy. It's your code. But in general, people care more about how fast you can make something and how is it going to work long term. Like most people, and that's a little bit of a tug of war, because they want quality and they want speed, and usually the truth is somewhere in between. But that's what I argue anyway. You know that you are a fairly senior profile as a programmer when you stop thinking about what you want to use to solve somebody's problem, and you start thinking in terms of what do they need, and what tools do I pick based on the needs of my customer.